welcome to Zoom with Czarny. I'm Dustin Czarny, Onondaga County's Democratic Elections Commissioner, and this is my interview show where I talk to democracy advocates and candidates each week to kind of get the lay of the land of what's going out there, in Onondaga County, New York State, and in the United States. And that's what this episode is about: is remembering January 6th with Christine Wood, a public citizen. She has been on our program several times, but her organization is having a couple of events. One today in DC that I'm going to be a part of, and one Saturday at the federal building in Syracuse that I'm also going to be a part of. I'm actually traveling right now into DC proper at the time this airs, to be part of a national press conference about January 6th and how it's impacted election administration. I'm honored to be part of this. Congressman Raskin is the headliner, and I just could not be more thrilled that I'm going to be part of an event with him. Also, former Ithaca Mayor Savante Merrick is going to be there. He's now moved on to the national space on protecting democracy. So this press conference, I'm driving down to DC and doing this press conference, and then driving back to do the event on Saturday at the federal building, but also just to be home. I didn't do a commissioner in a car this week. I got some personal things came up on Tuesday, and I just couldn't get it around to it. But I'll try to do maybe something kind of special about commissioner in a car, or I'll catch up next week. But for now, I want you to focus on these two events that are coming up, because I think they're great events, and that's why I had my good friend Christine Wood of Public Citizen on the show. It's a great interview about not only these events, but how we can move forward with our democracy and recover, and how things are still pretty, the vibrations from January 6th continue. And I hope that we'll find a way to get past that eventually. But it's a great conversation, so please tune in. Stay tuned for my interview with Christine Wood. Enjoy. We're back, and I'm very happy to have my good friend Christine Wood. She's with the Declaration for American Democracy Coalition and Public Citizen. She's been on our program several times. Christine, thanks so much for coming back on Zoom with Czarny.
Yeah, of course. It's always a fun time to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's not quite the fun time this time, right? Because we have a little bit of a somber occasion that we're remembering. And one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the program this week is that January 6th, the third anniversary of January 6th, is this Saturday. And there's several events going on that Public Citizen is involved with. And I'm doing both of the events that we're going to talk about. But I thought I'd bring you on and have you talk about what is going on and why. Why are we taking this time to remember January 6th?
Sure. Thanks, Dustin. Yeah, absolutely. It's been 3 years since January 6, 2021, which, as everyone remembers, was when there was a violent insurrection in our Capitol, led by Donald Trump and his allies in Congress, which left 5 people dead and over 100 officers injured. But it wasn't just about what happened that day, the people that were injured and the massive threat to our democracy at that moment. We've seen a continuance of these attacks on our democracy from the same group of extremists that have fueled threats to election workers and voters, voter suppression efforts across the country, and more. So we need to continue marking this day, reminding the American public what happened on that day and how it has fueled not just a really divisive climate in our political system in our country, but also one that's actively harming our democracy still. So we're going to keep showing up on this day until we're able to achieve the democracy that we all need and realize the American promise of democracy. So that's why we're taking action this year on January 6th. We're doing so in a few different ways. As you mentioned, we're organizing a big press conference in Washington, D.C. Thanks, Dustin, for making the journey down to Washington, D.C. to be with us. We'll be joined by members of Congress, by a variety of different organizations. Yes, good government and democracy and voting rights organizations, but also organizations from across issue areas, because this impacts all of us and our ability to be represented and make progress on all of the issues that matter to us. So we'll have a big event in Washington, D.C. on the 5th. And then on the 6th itself, there's going to be events across the country, including here in Syracuse. And our event is going to be outside the federal office building in downtown Syracuse at 2:30. So for folks in the Syracuse area, it would be great if you would stop by and join us.
Yeah, so yeah, I'm actually kind of going back and forth to DC several times over the next 4 days, which is weird for me, but I thought it was I was honored to be asked by Jonah who's a member of Public Citizen, who's organizing the DC event, to do this one and your event on Saturday, because I think it's very important to get the election administrator side
Absolutely.
of what we've had to deal with since January 6th, where it's longtime staff leaving the boards of elections. We've seen a lot of studies about the brain drain that's going on right now, where like hundreds and hundreds and thousands of years of collective experience is leaving boards of elections because of the threat of the insurrection, but also like the you know the threats that are coming going into the 2024 election. I know a lot of my fellow commissioners decided that it was time to retire before the next
Sure.
presidential election. And that's leading a lot of new commissioners into their first presidential election in a very trying time. But also, even election inspectors, recruiting election inspectors has been hard because people are afraid that the violence that they saw on January 6th is going to happen at the polling places. So we haven't seen that yet, but we never saw what we saw on January 6th before it happened, too. So, yeah, I'm really, honored to do this event. We're driving down Thursday night, and then we're doing the event on Friday. Then I'm coming back for the Saturday event, and then I'll be back in DC on Monday for another event. Some other events, not dealing with the insurrection, but with my role on the local leadership council for the elections commissioner, or I'm sorry, the elections. The EAC, the Elections Assistance Commission. So it's a lot of traveling, but it's worth it. Christine, you're also involved in Public Citizen, and is in other ways, not just these events. What are some of the other things that you're involved with right now?
Sure. Well, one thing I do want to just kind of highlight is what you mentioned about the importance of getting the election official kind of perspective. Some of my colleagues at Public Citizen are doing really fantastic work to actually try to protect election officials. I'm sure that you've seen the Brennan Center and other organizations have released really comprehensive polling of election workers over the past few years that have showed what you just articulated, that folks are leaving in mass, and the reason is because they're feeling the distrust in the environment that they're in, and they're feeling actually kind of under threat. So in the bill that the federal package that Public Citizen and the Declaration for American Democracy Coalition is working to pass, there's federal legislation in there to protect election workers from harassment. So that's a big legislative package that we're working to pass. Right now, we of course can't pass it because unfortunately, House Republicans don't support that bill. And that bill is called the Freedom to Vote Act. Not only does it protect election workers, but it also would work to combat the voter suppression that we're seeing across the country by expanding early voting, vote by mail, making automatic voter registration available across the country, and much more. It would also shine a light on secret money spending in our democracy. That also, fuels kind of a lot of these kind of bad actors. But in addition to that, and in the meantime, until we can pass that legislation, a lot of my colleagues at Public Citizen are actually working to support local and state organizations passing this type of legislation in states across the country. So it's something that we feel really passionate about, making sure that both voters and election workers can feel safe at their polls and going about their day-to-day lives. So that's one thing I just really wanted to highlight, just because, as you mentioned, Dustin, it's really important that election workers and poll workers can see out our democracy. And I feel like that's been taken for granted for so many years, but because of the big lie and the damage sense, it's really become a problem in recent years.
So yeah, let's talk about that, because that, we can look back at what happened on January 6th, which is ongoing, right? I mean, the insurrection really hasn't stopped. We've seen members of Congress continue to use their positions to sow doubts in our American democracy. Obviously, the former president is continuing to do that, even though he's under 91 indictments now, and for doing the exact same things that he's continuing to do now, and that he's threatening to do if he loses the election again. In this rise in threats of political violence, we saw death threats against the Colorado Supreme Court, just I find it just so chilling that every time I'm watching a news report and they're talking about somebody taking an action to preserve our democracy, whether it's invoking the 14th Amendment, or just prosecuting Donald Trump or something like that, it's met with, "Are you afraid?" because of the threats of political violence out there and how common that is now. Is that what you're seeing as well? Is that, are you seeing a rise? I mean, I think we've all thought maybe it might get a little bit better, but it seems to have not. It seems to have gotten, and it's starting to whip into a fever pitch again.
Sure. I mean, this is just anecdotal. I don't have recent comprehensive data on this, but from conversations I've had from colleagues in this space, is it something that is absolutely continuing. So an organization that we work with a lot is CREW, which is Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, and they're actually leading on these 14th Amendment lawsuits that are, at least for the time being, knocking Donald Trump off of the ballot. And I believe that Donald Trump has actually mentioned that organization by name, which is very, very frightening. So I know that colleagues there and other organizations in this space are definitely taking those security concerns really seriously and making sure, taking precautions to make sure that our staff are well protected. It's definitely at the top of everyone's minds, even in the advocate space, where we're not public officials, where typically we don't have to be concerned with that sort of thing. So it's something that we're still continuing to see, and something that I've even heard feedback from even secretaries of state, so even folks in the highest possible positions, have received death threats over the past couple of years. So. I think that just adds to folks that maybe are poll workers, election workers, being frightened, because with all of the security that Secretary of States have access to, kind of what does that mean for folks that don't necessarily have those resources. So that's why this legislation to protect election workers is so critical. But I think the broader thing is changing this really dangerous political climate. Which is a more difficult task. And I think what we need in this moment is accountability and reform. Is the reforms we need, including, as I mentioned, legislation to protect election workers, the Freedom to Vote Act, restoring the Voting Rights Act, ending partisan gerrymandering. There's all of these reforms that will strengthen our democracy, but we need that accountability as well, as there needs to be consequences for causing harm to our democracy and to others.
So, Christine, it does look like it's going to get worse before it gets better. But I'm an optimist at heart, and I do believe it will get better. But I'm still struggling to find out how. And that's one of the things that I like to talk to democracy advocates in my Zoom with Czarny series. One of the things that I want to focus on this year is kind of a how are we going to turn this around? You know, I mean, there is a day past Trump, I hope, at some point. But I don't think Trump is the only problem here. I mean, we've seen some authoritarian bends from Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, who can't even admit that slavery was the start of, was the cause of the Civil War until 2 days later. And they're appealing to a pretty large segment, a larger segment than I think we all thought, of the right wing, you know, section of our country that seem to want to abandon democracy in place of, Christofascism or whatever you want to call it, authoritarianism. It's a I guess it's different things to different people, but at the end of the day, what they're trying to do is instill a minority rule against the populace of our country. So what do you think are how are we gonna end this? I know that's a big question, but what do you think are some of the steps that we can work towards to try to turn this ship around a little bit?
Sure. Yeah, that's a big question. It's something that I spend my days thinking about and strategizing with folks on. I mean, a few different things. One is we have to win kind of the hearts and minds of the American public, and we need to ensure that kind of our narrative wins the day. So everything that folks, that activists are doing to help push our message out there is incredibly helpful. That's why we at Public Citizen organize tons of, op-eds, letter to the editor pushes, social media storms, is we have to call out the mis and disinformation when we see it and the lies, and we need to kind of correct the record to the public. So I think that public piece is really, really important. In terms of kind of structural reforms, we're in a tough spot. Not gonna lie, like I said, at kind of in my role as we're working towards that big moment when we can pass sweeping legislation. One of the reasons why I'm so passionate about the Freedom to Vote Act and the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act is I think that it would be absolutely transformative in terms of our democracy. Not only the voting rights reforms, but also with the fair representation piece. As you mentioned, you mentioned kind of minority rule, as that is something that we're seeing in states across the country. And, we don't necessarily need to wait until we have a democracy trifecta federally to make progress, as we can make progress in the states right now. In Ohio, they're launching a really exciting ballot measure for fair redistricting in that state. And for folks that might follow Ohio politics, it's one of the most gerrymandered states in the country. When you look at kind of the breakdown of Democrats, Republicans, and independents, kind of statewide, and then look at congressional representation, there's a huge disparity. So this ballot measure could be really transformative for folks in the state and could give them a real opportunity to have a truly representative democracy. Whereas right now, it's skewed and gerrymandered in an obscene way. So there are opportunities in states across the country to make progress in the meantime. And then also while we work towards passing kind of this big sweeping legislation. But I do think that the media piece and lifting up kind of our own narrative is really, really essential as well. We all saw how the big lie kind of impacted how folks thought about things like vote by mail, and the trust in our elections. So we need to be the antidote to that mis and disinformation, and we need to be out there publicly reminding folks how secure our elections are, reminding folks of the various ways that they can cast their ballots, and encouraging folks that their vote and their voice does matter, and they should, exercise them.
Yeah, I mean I guess that's really, the longest journey starts with the first steps, and I think that's where we are. I think much of the last few years have been playing defense almost, a little bit, although one of the things that I've looked at over the last few years that has given me hope is that the momentum of these anti-democracy candidates seems to have been blunted, whether we're talking about the Kerry Lake and, or Doug Mastriano, or, some of these other, people who lost in 2022 and in 2023. We saw a rejection. We saw what happened in Virginia, where the Democrats were able to take back both, or keep the Senate and take back, the House in Virginia, which, abortion was on the ballot, and that was, one of the big things, because the governor there, in his esteemed wisdom, decided to, declare that he wanted to do a 15-week abortion ban if he got control of the chambers, and they rejected it. We saw the ballot, the Ohio ballot measure for abortion as well. It seems like there's a rejection of some of the, on abortion, but also some, defending of democracy. People are making these choices when they go to the ballot box, and that, a lot of people said, and like, look, I've been in this field a long time, and I've been a fair districting advocate, and a lot of things, but nobody seemed to care, before 2020, before the insurrection. They, and they started to care then, and they seem to have, seem to, even if they're not telling pollsters this, they seem to be telling the ballot box, what they
Absolutely.
want, and that's one of the things that I'm real um happy to see. But that being said, and oh, by the way, I do want to talk about that Ohio redistricting ballot initiative, because that's, what we fought for so hard here in Syracuse, and one, it's the same type of citizen-led redistricting that we see in California, and in certain parts of like Austin, Texas, and other places, and it really does. You see what happened in states like Michigan that enacted a fair redistricting, you know, um, a fair map, and you saw all of a sudden the state legislature is way more reflective of the
Mhm.
populace as a whole, as opposed to these gerrymandered districts. So yeah, gerrymandering is part of it, right? I mean, getting fair districts is a something that leads to less extreme candidates. Yes, on
Mhm.
both sides of the aisle, but we know where the most extreme ones are coming from. But in non-safe districts, you can't run all the way to the right or all the way to the left. You have to run, not necessarily to the middle, but you have to be sane. You
Yeah.
can't just
You'll be held accountable if not.
yeah, you got to be
There's
held
an
accountable for
accountability
your
element.
votes. That's right. So yeah, I mean that I know, redistricting continues to go on, even though it was supposed to be done, and is it's continuing to go on here in New York State. We have new congressional maps coming. We don't know when it's going to come, but they're coming. So I guess that's those are some good points about what what we're seeing on the ground, and in your in the space. What are let's talk about the two events. We kind of did high level about it, but let's focus on the event on Friday in DC. Who are some of the Do you have the list of the Congress people that are coming? Who are some of the speakers besides me? I'm there, but who are some of the other ones that are there, and why are we gathering in DC? What's the point of that?
Sure. Well, we do have some really exciting speakers. Senator Van Hollen is going to join us, as well as Congressman Jamie Raskin, who's been an absolute champion on this issue, as
One
I'm
of my
sure.
personal heroes. It's one of the reasons why I decided to go is knowing that he was going to be there. That I'm watching him in the impeachment and on the January 6th commission has been a pleasure, and I can't wait to see him. To be quite
Absolutely.
honest.
Yeah. Yeah. We're so excited to have him. So we have a really great lineup of speakers with those two members of Congress joining us. And then, as I mentioned, we also have folks from across the issue space. We're excited to have you there, Dustin, but we also have folks from voting rights organizations, ethics organizations, climate organizations, and more. Because like I mentioned earlier, everyone understands that without our democracy, we don't have a country. We don't have a functioning government. And in order to make progress on the issues we care about, we need, a functioning, a true representative democracy. So we have a fantastic lineup of speakers. We are excited that several major media networks have confirmed that they're going to join us as well. And we're going to be right outside the Capitol at the House Triangle, which was right outside. And of course, the reason we're going there is because that's where this all happened on January 6th. I won't say that's where it started because we know that there was a long lead up. It was the kind of slowest burn ever. I feel like we all kind of saw it from a mile away with Donald Trump fueling the big lie for months and months in the lead up. But it was something that impacted all of us. I mean, I think all of us remember where we were on January 6th, but it has an even more closeness to folks in Washington, D.C., to these members of Congress and their staff that were hiding in locked offices under desks, texting family members scared for what this may bring. And then also to residents in DC who, first off, don't have a representation in our federal government. And because they're not a state, they didn't have proper support on January 6th on that day. So it means a lot that we're going to be in DC with local DC organizations, members of Congress. Representative Eleanor Holmes Norton of DC will be there. So for us, it's really important that we're showing out there in a place that, I mean, we were all impacted, but them like no other.
Yeah, when I went back to DC last year, it was amazing to actually walk the halls of the Capitol. And, I went on a couple of tours, with the two events I was in last year. They both had tours of the Capitol that I went on. But to see that I was able to like go back and relive some of the images that I saw on January 6th and saying, wow, I was there. I was in the Capitol Rotunda and in all of its glory. And to see the disrespect that happened, to that building, but also even some of the security guards, even though they're not supposed to talk about January 6th under House Republican rules, that they were showing us, even though I think I'm not going to tell you who it was because I don't want to get in trouble.
Yeah,
But they were showing us the doors that they crashed through.
yeah.
They were showing us the impact points. They were still upholding democracy by reminding people of what happened, and it was unsettling.
Sure.
I remember going to these buildings as a kid and saying and obviously revering them, but to remember now as an adult going there and seeing just the gorgeous splendor and history that is on display, but on the flip side, the disrespect that was done that day, and how so many people seem to have, pigeonholed that and memory hold it and just put it away and forgot, and now call it a, unsupervised tours or whatever
Yeah.
crap. Sorry that they've come up with, but um, so, but you're also doing an event here in Syracuse on Saturday on the actual third anniversary, and we've done that each of the last 2 years. So let's talk about that, because this is something that people can actually attend. Yeah, if you're in DC and you're watching this program, sure, attend the Friday thing. But if most of us, my audience, 90.999% of my audience is Syracuse and Onondaga County based. Talk to us about the event on Saturday.
Sure. Well, first off, want to give a massive shout out to all of the co-hosts and co-organizers. So Seeing My Solidarity is hosting the event, along with Indivisible Salt City, Indivisible, Onondaga County, and Public Citizen. So huge shout out to all of the different folks that are involved with organizing the event from those organizations that are really leading on this. The event will be from 2:30 to 3:30. Again at the U.S. Federal Building. And it's really important that we're holding this event here in this district because as everyone knows, we have a member of Congress who is kind of especially sympathetic to the big lie and its proponents, and it's a proponent himself. So it's really important here that here in Syracuse, we're challenging that. We're holding our representative accountable. And we're reminding folks in the community what happened that day and why it's so critical that we hold these bad actors accountable, and that we're passing reforms to strengthen our democracy. So we're going to have a variety of local leaders join us to speak. Of course, you, Dustin, will be one of those folks. I know that Maurice Brown, who is now officially a county legislator, will join us, along with a variety of other speakers who will speak to different topics and issue areas related to our democracy on January 6th. So excited to hopefully see folks there this Saturday on January 6th at 2:30.
Yeah, I'm excited to be there. It's going to be a great event. I think it's important that we, do our best to continue to remember, and not only remember, but chart that path forward. And that's what you're doing, Christine, with your work. And I want to thank you for that. And I guess we're kind of getting towards that time where, it's getting towards that time where people stop listening or watching. But I always like to end with, what haven't we talked about? What is something out there that you wanted to get out there, that you, about these events or anything else? That the floor is yours, Christine.
I will just say, I guess in the spirit of, I forgot which NPR podcast it is. It's been a minute. They do the Can't Let It Go. Right now what I can't let
That's
go.
actually the NPR politics podcast. I know
Yes,
that.
NPR politics podcast.
I listen to that religiously. So yes, they can't let it go. Yes, perfect.
So yes, in the spirit of Can't Let It Go, is I am kind of intensely watching what's happening with these 14th Amendment ballot challenges to Donald Trump. It's very up in the air what's going to happen. As folks know, right now he is off the ballot in Colorado, new lawsuit coming out of Maine. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens as this escalates to the federal Supreme Court and what might happen in other states. So I would say something to watch closely over the coming weeks. And then of course, these trials. We've never had an election where one of the presidential frontrunners was kind of under 4 different investigations. So it'll be an interesting ride this year. So something else to keep an eye out for is these trials, where again we'll have an opportunity to show the American public what happened on that day. So those are the things that are top of mind for me. But in the meantime, I think it's just really critical that we continue to be vocal on these issues, show up, and call for the concrete solutions that we know exist in the form of, legislation to protect our democracy.
Well, when this show goes up, I'll be on my way into DC proper to do this, because it's going to go up Friday morning. But I'll put a link into the press advisory for both events, and and when you're to those events and to Public Citizen, because what a great organization. And thank you so much for coming on and talking about the work you do. And thank you so much for doing what you do. I've watched, I've been friends with you now for 8 years. And
Wow.
we first met during the 2016 campaign, and to see, someone like you from the Syracuse area that is playing a major part on the national scene is great to see. And so thank you, Christine, for the work you do.
Well, thank you, Dustin. Thanks for the work that you do. Thanks for being a great partner, and for joining both events this week. Enjoy your road trip down. We'll catch you on Facebook Live on the 5th. And yeah, we'll see you in person on January 6th.
That's awesome. Thank you, Christine. And that was my interview with Christine Wood, a Public Citizen. Please go to the Syracuse event tomorrow at 2:30 at the Federal Building. The links will be in the show notes. And if you want, you can watch the live stream of the event. I'll share it on my pages of the event in DC today. And please remember to always remember that our democracy is fragile, and an event like January 6th cannot be memory hold. It can't be put away. We have to remember this because it is still shaping our democracy right now. Next week, I'll be back with the commissioner in car on Tuesday, but I'll be in DC again because I'm going to be part of my annual meeting with the local leadership council of the Elections Assistance Commission. That is happening on Monday and Tuesday. So I'm flying down for that. It's part of, I represent New York on that council, and we're doing it a little earlier. We did the summer this last time. We're doing a little early because of the presidential elections, but I'm looking forward to that because that's always very informative. My Zoom with Czarny next week will be with Susan Lerner of Common Cause, and we'll be checking in with what she hopes to see on the New York State legislative session is opening up, and what she's hoping to see out of that this year. My weekly wonk this weekend will be about DustinCzarny.com. I'm going to do a quick little weekly wonk to kind of see where things have gone. Year 2 of hosting my website, and I do that because I think it's important, a way to collect all this information. And it's always free. It's part of my educational outreach to Onondaga County and beyond. And it's I want to kind of take a look at the stats from that website from where we were last year. It's year 2 of it, and we'll kind of see how people are interacting with it, and how we can make it better. So that's all I got for you. Thank you very much, and enjoy your week. Bye-bye.